That's your fly swatter?
Yeah.
I'll put that in.
Okay. All right. So I'd love to share what really marked my life in my relationship and why I not only am a believer but a follower of Jesus. And that was an encounter in a cave for me. It's a two-part, 2-day story. So it was an encounter in a cave and then the next day with a tree. And just briefly, I'm the first in my generation to follow the Lord, and I wasn't raised in a Christian home. But once I got to really pursuing Christ, it was really to prove to someone else that they were a good person. Started Googling things about what does the Bible say, and next thing I know, I am reading the Word and I'm realizing I want it for me. I grew up with a lot of depression and just didn't have purpose and a lot of trauma from my young age. And so as I was just reading the Word, there was slowly things that I was getting convicted on. So now at this point I had been following Christ, pursuing Christ, still had a lot of questions, but I had faith and I believed for about 3 years. Finally arriving to a point in my life where I then remember having kind of like an argument at God, or just this thing where I was like, you know what? At this point, I just believed. I believed everything in the Word for what it was. I remember also hearing so many other people's testimonies. I never had a testimony of my own, but I just believed it. And as I kind of briefly said, I grew up with depression. There was the first time I tried to commit suicide when I was 10 years old. Then there was several other times, and just times that I should have died. And so knowing all of that, and being in this point in time where I then just kind of got real with the Lord. And I remember, I guess I kind of did my first fast without realizing it. I refused to work that day, refused to eat. I took my phone, I put it in a drawer, and I just kind of got stompy with the Lord. And I was like, you know what? I know that you know that I believe every single word in this Bible to be true. I just know, if you are this God that created everything and you know everything, then you know those things. It's not something new I'm telling you. And, but it was I remember at that point I was just reading the Word and I would question people at church, leaders, well, why can't we just do this? The Bible says this, why are we doing this? And I just didn't understand. And I'm like, I'm so hard-headed, I just don't understand. So I started asking, I just shut my Bible and I said, God, that's it. I know, what I just said, I know that you know that I believe everything in this Word to be true. And I know I'm alive for a reason and a purpose, but I don't necessarily understand what that is. So I was just and then I know who you are for all these other people, but who are you to me specifically? And why did you make me? So it was just this becoming real and asking God to make Himself real to me in a time. So that kind of prefaced this time in the cave. And I remember I was somebody that I grew up working, and that's all I knew, and I love working. But I remember for some reason my parents had bought land years prior in a place called Roy, New Mexico. It's not even a town, it's a village. There's 200 people in the village. It's so small, and it's just, I remember at this time, I just felt, you know what? I think that maybe I should take off work, and I'm supposed to go to Roy, New Mexico, to my parents' land. And then as the plan, the thought, the curiosity led me to actually making a plan. Then I was like, you know what? I asked God, why did He make me? I think He's going to give me a list. He's going to give me a list, and it's going to be why He made me, a list to start checking off of the things that I could do for Him. So, and at this time, at this point, I remember there was, I kept reading I was just reading the Word. So at this point, I was a lot more in the Old Testament than I was in the New. And I kept reading about fasting. And I was asking people, what is fasting? Do people do it nowadays? So I remember that was something also that I came to a decision that I think I'm going to do this as well. I'm going to fast. So I'm going and I'm going to go be here. And the Lord's going to give me a list. I'm going to fast, and it's going to be this thing. And so, yeah, as I'm going, there was years prior when I was a little kid, part of the things that had led me also to this point was I always wanted a relationship. So I wanted a relationship. It started off with my mother. It started off then going into I wanted a relationship with my father, wanted to date. I never dated. But my parents, my mother didn't have that relationship, so she didn't know how to give me what I wanted or needed. And with my father, I always wanted to be a daddy's girl and him take me hunting. But that was good reasons, like he didn't want his little girl coming and being around like men that were drinking. And so I still at this point, kind of leading up to this point, but there was a connection made with a man in Roy, New Mexico, who my parents had 140 acres. On this same lease road, this man has acres, like 1,000 acres on the same at the very end. And we had made a connection prior, and he eventually gave me a key to his property. And he had told me to hold on to it. Like it was because I wanted to hunt. And so this connection was made. He was like, all you have to do is get your tags basically and have permission. And you have my permission. Not only that, I'm giving you a key to my property. And this was years prior to this encounter. And so I had this key, and my parents have this land in Roy, New Mexico in the middle of like nowhere and whatever. And so when I finally made plans, I thought, you know what? I don't want to go to my parents' property. I want to go to this guy's property. He has 1,000 acres, like, and it overlooks the canyons. It's red rocks, just like what's around here. And so as I'm arriving, I remember I messaged him and I said, hey, can I camp on your property? I didn't tell him I was fasting because I'm a woman and by myself. I didn't want him to freak out. But he said, well, you still have the key, right? So why are you asking me? And I thought, well, like, it's not my property, so, you know, and he met me there. Again, there was a little bit more buildup where he was telling me the background story of just this property had been in his family since the 1800s. And I was like, wow, not only is this property basically kind of untouched, but it is, like, because it's in a small village, but it's only been in his family. And so he leads me to two places. He leads me to two areas that he said, I want to show you these areas before I leave. Like, they're super special to me. And one was this cliff, this ledge that overlooked like the canyon. And he was telling me about how he had lost a daughter when she was in high school, and that he would come out there and just kind of spend time with the Lord. And when he showed me that, and I realized, like, wow, I think that was also a connection, because like his name is my biological father's name as well. And you know, he lost a daughter, and it was just, you know, these little things. It was building up to this moment. And then he said, I want to take you to one more place. He said, when we were little kids, my brother and I, we were supposed to be watching the sheep or something like that. And we ran off, we were playing, and we found this cave. He goes, I want to show you this cave. So he takes me to this cave. And as I enter this cave, I'm just looking at it, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, wow, this is really strange. There's absolutely no animal prints, no animal poop, like nothing. It's completely clean. And I'm like so excited. I'm like, this is where I'm staying the night, like for sure. Like, and so I'm like just ready for him to leave. And so he leaves, and I get all my things like that. Like, again, there's no internet, there's no service, like I'm fasting. So I have plenty of time to just sit. And I come and I sit, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm looking out at everything. And I'm just, yeah, like the realness of just like my mortality and the fertility of life, but also the vastness of God was just like in this balance, and it was drawing me into this awe and wonder. And just even how it was like built up, like, how did I get this key? I've had this key forever, like that I'm in this cave, it's like untouched. And like, how come my parents bought land in Roy, New Mexico? Like, so, like, how did they even find it? Like, I'm just in this moment, like, wow, how did I get here? So as I'm sitting there, I'm looking out and like realizing like a mountain lion could come eat me at any time, like this cave could collapse on me, all of these things. And again, also seeing God's complete creation. Like, I'm in the midst of God's complete creation, and that looking at the birds, how they're just like the Bible talks about, like the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, like how they are fed, and they don't store food, or they don't look for it, but God feeds them and he provides for them, and how much more he cares for us. And I could just see it, like, and I feel it. And so I'm in this moment, and then the Lord starts speaking to me. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was almost audible, because it was, so I'll just continue, but it was like, so as I'm sitting there and I'm just like, wow, what's going on? And the Lord interrupts, and he comes in and he's like, Sierra, I hand carved this cave for you. And it was right when I was thinking those thoughts of like looking around, like there's no poop, there's no marks, it's clean. And he's like, I hand carved this cave for you, Sierra. He goes, Sierra, I have been waiting for you in this moment all of your life. And I just thought, wow, okay. And then as he's going into this next thing, and he's just saying, Sierra, you never had to earn my love. And again, like what I was thinking as I had the questions that were prompted that got me to this point, I thought he was going to hand me this list. And so now I'm in this point, and he's just telling me, Sierra, you never had to earn my love. And I'm like, I don't actually understand what that means, and that's strange, but I could feel the truth of it. I could feel his presence, like I could feel, yeah, all of these things. And as he said that, what happens next, I really felt like God allowed to happen, because he used it. And what happened next was, there was all these images. They were playing one by one in my mind of all the vile, repulsive things that I have done. Images of me actually doing things before this moment, before I met Christ, and they were gross. And I remember that as they were playing in my mind, the Lord saying, Sierra, I loved you the whole time. I loved you in this moment. I loved you in this moment. And he was pointing out, he was putting his finger on every single thing. And I remember I just broke, because I didn't know. And as I said before, like, all I wanted was a relationship. And I was so deprived of it all my life that in this moment I was actually stepping into the intimacy and the love that I always wanted in the relationship, and completely being vulnerable, because it was like being exposed. All the dirty, vile, like gross, repulsive things that I had done were now like replaying in my mind. But not only that, God was like saying that I saw you and I was with you and I loved you in those moments. There's nothing that you could have done that could have stopped my love. And I have always wanted that kind of love, but I also never how does that even make sense? Like, I knew that I deserved nothing, like the opposite of love. I deserved what Jesus paid for my life, was the penalty, was like death by a cross. Like, and so I just began weeping, and I was weeping, and like, here I am, like not doing anything, and he's just loving me. That's what he wanted. He didn't want to tell me what to do. He wanted to tell me who he was and how much he loved me, and he interrupted that as well, and just to kind of bring me to a balance as well, and saying, Sierra, I desire this moment of intimacy for all of my children, like all of my children, like I want. And like at this very moment, I'm actually being intimate with somebody else in another area, like, you know, somebody that would freak out if, like, because this was me, like I could be in this moment in the cave, but he was showing me somebody else would be freaking out, and they're in a beach house or something, but he's having that moment with them as well. And he said, but not yet everybody has positioned themselves to receive this kind of love. And so I was just weeping, and I was filled with like, this is what I've always wanted. I felt complete peace, purpose. I could feel the truth. Like, I was so good at blocking out love, pushing people away, building walls and everything. And in that moment, it was so undeniable and irresistible, that love. And it just, yeah, it broke me, and it marked my life. And at that point on, like, I knew that I was giving the Lord, like, I had already been saved and I had already been pursuing the Lord, but this moment out of love, like the Bible says, it's the goodness or the kindness of God that leads people to repentance. And it's also like the parable that talks about the two people that were forgiven, one of much debt and one of little debt. And like, which one, Jesus asked, which one do you think is more grateful? The one that was forgiven much. And everybody has things, but in this moment, like, I was like undone by his love. So then it led me to just like, and I knew what I was saying, and I was like, Lord, my life is yours. Because up until this point, like, I didn't really understand my purpose. I didn't understand why I was still alive. And I was just like, you can have my life. But not only that, I was like, God, use my life that I can be like a bridge, or that I can be used so that other people can have their personalized encounter with God. Because I knew it was that moment that was going to change. That moment marked me, and that moment would change other people. So I said that, and then I said, use me like Paul. So then the next day, like I remember that, just having beautiful time with the Lord. So then the next day, I remember now I'm in a place of kind of like, I'm super comfortable with the Lord. Now I feel like I can like kind of just enter straight in and ask him anything or say anything. And so at this point, that next day I was arguing at God, because he wasn't arguing back with me. I was just arguing at him. I don't really remember what I was saying, but I know I was like, oh God, like, no wonder people think this, no wonder this happens, this and this. Why can't you just do this? If you would do this, it would be so much more clear, and all of these things. And I was in the desert, and I was fasting. It's my second day of fasting, drinking water, but no food. And so I quickly kind of came to a point of needing to sit down to rest. And I came to a rock pretty much like the one that I'm sitting on. And I would just like, I got to sit down for a second. So I sit down, and as I'm sitting there, or as I sit down, and after I said all of these things, the Lord said, are you done? And I'm just like, ugh. And also, as I'm sitting there, what's right in front of me is this ginormous tall pine tree. And it's this dead pine tree sitting right in front of me. I'm facing it. So the Lord says, are you done? And then he says, do you see that tree that's in front of you? And again, I'm like, come on. Like, now I'm irritated, because I'm like, of course, I know that you know that I'm looking at it. Like, why are you even asking me that? You're God, you know everything. Of course I'm looking at it. But not only that, it's like you didn't answer anything that I said. You said, am I done? And now you're asking me if I'm looking at this tree. Yes, I'm looking at this tree. So the Lord says, would you climb that tree? And so in this moment, it was like very, very evident that it was almost audible, because the voice, what he begins speaking next, it's not this audible sound, but it's one that it's an all-knowing. It's so much truth, and it stills everything in me, because I'm in the place of like, now I'm kind of fired up, and I'm like kind of like a little bit mad, a little bit testy, a little bit, all these things. So normally I would have racing thoughts, and my thoughts were about to, because I'm just like, why? Like, he's asking me to climb this tree, and that tree's dead. So this is what I go into saying, and I'm like, absolutely not. That was my response. Like, absolutely not. Like, that tree is a dead, tall pine tree, and it's not like a drop off, but it's a rolling cliffside. So like, if I start climbing that tree and a branch breaks, like, I'm gonna fall and die. And so like, I say these things to the Lord, and this is where he begins speaking, and it's like one thing after the other, and it stills everything. Like, I become dumb and silent before the Lord. And so he's like, Sierra, okay, let me see if I can get this right. He says, Sierra, do you not think that I brought you out here for a reason? He's like, do you not think that I'm holding that tree up? Do you not think that I can bring all things that were once dead back to life? He said, do you not know that I brought you who was once dead back to life? So he said all those things like this, and I was like, oh my gosh. I didn't realize that as he was saying this, first of all, I had stopped. I had shut up, like become still in all of me, but I got up and I had walked to the tree, and I had already climbed 2 body lengths up the tree. So now I'm in this moment of realization of like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually on the tree now, and I'm hugging it like a koala, like so tight, and I'm like shaking because I'm like so afraid. Like I'm like shaking, and the tree's shaking because of my weight, but also the wind. And I'm like, okay, at this point, I have to climb down or I have to climb up. So I start climbing up because I'm already there, right? So as I'm climbing up, I start like out loud saying, I trust you, Lord. And I just keep saying, I trust you, Lord. I trust you, Lord. I trust you. And I absolutely did not trust the Lord at all. Like, absolutely not. But I thought, if I die, because this is a real moment, and if I die, I'm dying saying I trust the Lord. And so I start climbing. I climb as far as I can get. And like, of course, like there's like a little tiny point. I don't climb that. But I get as high as I can get, and I'm coming back down. And 2 things, like there was one scripture that I felt like the Lord really made real for me in this point in my season. It was in James. I don't remember exactly where, but James, it says, faith without works is dead. And I remember the Lord later giving me this picture of just, let's say, like there's a bridge that's like super scary looking and it doesn't look safe at all, but it's like dangling across a canyon, and say like, Lee, like the one that's with the camera, that I can say that I trust you. Like, I trust you with my life. I trust you. Like, you're somebody that has built that level of trust and relationship with, that I trust everything that you say. And say that you tell me that, like, hey, Sierra, like, you can go across that bridge. I've done cartwheels on that bridge. Like, you can run across that bridge, all of these things. And I can trust that to a point. But until it's actually my turn, or I have to make that action and I have to walk across it myself, there's going to be something that I walk through that I get to actually see, that through me actually going across it, I get to put that faith in the bank and say that now I know I can trust it. Now I know I believe. Now I know. And so this was the very point of when that scripture started playing out for me. So as I'm coming down, and my feet hit the ground, it's just like, okay, also, I don't know video games so well, but I know it well enough to know like what happens to the little Mario guy when he eats the mushroom and he goes bloop and he grows. And so as soon as my feet hit the ground, my faith just grew. And I was like freaking out, because I was like, before, as I'm climbing the tree, just seconds before, well, it was a good bit climbing the tree, but just before, I'm like telling the Lord, I trust you, but I didn't believe. And I wanted to, but I had so much, it was just this moment. And so when my feet hit the ground, I realized God had asked me to climb that tree. And I climbed that tree, and not only I climbed it, but I got back down, and I can trust the Lord. And so I'm just like, wow, what the heck? Like, I could trust the Lord, oh my gosh, like, wow, that's awesome. Like, and the Lord's letting me celebrate for about like 2 seconds. And he says, would you climb that tree again? I was like, absolutely not. And then the Lord rattled off again. He said these things again. And here I go. I start climbing again. I get all the way as high as I could again, and I start coming back down. My feet hit the ground, my faith grew again. Same thing, same, maybe similar circumstance, but my faith grew again. Like seeing that I could trust the Lord. And again, I'm celebrating all of these things. And then as soon as, like, again, not long, the Lord goes, would you climb it again? That time I was like, okay, this is all weird. Like, he's like everything. So I just walked off. Like, I didn't even acknowledge that I acknowledged in my head, or I tried to, like, I know, yeah. So I walk off, and as I'm walking off, because I'm thinking like, I'm also fasting, I haven't eaten, maybe I'm crazy, like maybe like, I don't even know, this is just so surreal. Like, I don't even know what's going on in my life right now, but I'm just walking away. And so I walk away, and I felt the Lord say, Sierra, I still love you. And I start walking, and I'm walking, and I'm just like, wow, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. And as I'm walking away, I felt the Lord, like I felt like I could feel him and see him. And he would like had his hands on his belly, and he's rolling on the ground, and he's laughing like gut, like laughing, like, when you laugh so hard your abs hurt. Like, I just feel him just filled so much with joy. He wasn't laughing at me, but with me. Those moments of like these pure, like, I wasn't serving the Lord and I wasn't doing all these things, but I was with the Lord, and it was so intimate and so pure, and that he was like, it was blessing him. And so I'm walking away. I go back to the second place that I was camping that night. It wasn't the cave, but wherever it was. And I arrive at it, and I'm sitting down, and I'm just like beside myself. I'm like, what is actually going on? And I remember sitting there, and then there's this hummingbird, and it flies, and it comes to just like sitting in my face, and I'm like, get up, what is happening? And so I'm like, he's happy, I'm happy, but then I get sad, because I go, because it just hurts my heart. And I just realize, I'm like, Lord, did you actually ask me to climb it a third time? And I feel like, not like in seriousness, or like, what I would experience as my earthly father maybe, but more of a like, okay, Sierra, you asked me a real question, I'm going to give you a real answer. And so he was like, okay, Sierra, yes. He's like, I absolutely asked you to climb it a third time. So then I was like, okay, Lord, but what happens if I climb it a third time, and like, you keep asking me to climb it. Like, when is it supposed to stop? When does it end? And he said, Sierra, if I asked you to climb it one time, 10 times, 100 times, or all day long, he said, you're going to have to climb it every single time that I ask. He said, you're the one that said you want to be used like Paul. And that was what I had said the previous night in the cave. So I was like, oh, I sure did. So I got up, and I was like, man. So I got up, I had to hike all the way back over to the tree because I left, right? So I go all the way back to the tree, and I arrive, and I start climbing up. And this time the Lord said, Sierra, I want you to stop, because I'm not a young kid anymore. I'm not someone that's also living recklessly where I'm trying to take my life. I had a glimpse of purpose, so that kind of changed. So I had a little bit of fear of, like, things that I could possibly die of. And so as I'm climbing this tree, like, he said, Sierra, I want you to stop and sit on every branch. Like, I want you to sit, and I want you, like, in the moment of, like, all of this fear and this real tension of a moment, I want you to stop and allow me to take that and give you peace. And so I did, and I stopped. And the more I would stop and I would sit, he just completely took that fear. And I had peace in the middle of a real situation that should have brought fear. And so got it again all the way, almost same level. And as I was coming back down, my feet hit the ground, my faith grew again, but he didn't ask me to climb it again. And as soon as my feet hit the ground, though, all of a sudden when I looked over, it's not like there was a marked trail, but I could almost see it completely weave through trees and in this path. I could see this path that wasn't there, but I could just see it. And he's like, go this way. And I almost was like, bah! And I was like, oh, shut up. Like, I had quickly seen like what that does, trying to argue with him. And so I was just like, okay, you know what? I trust you. And so I go. And I go to the end of this path where he had taken me. And what's coming alive, not only all of these things, but also just like this realization of how much I love nature. And what he did was he just took me and he brought me to this ledge, this cliffside, and it was like this beautiful view that I wouldn't have been able to find on my own. He was like, I just knew that you would enjoy this. Like, he's like, just sit with me. And so I did. And from these two moments on, like this encounter in the cave and the next day in the tree, like it absolutely marked my life. Like I remember, like it was so real. And just by asking God to make himself real to me, he not only did, but he's like, I think he revealed the truth and the depth of his character. That, like it says in the Bible, God is love. And the world knows love based on an emotion or a feeling, which is fleeting. But God in that moment showed me his unconditional love. That wasn't based on things that I did, because all those memories that came in my mind were all these like really gross things. Like, and I don't know if you know the reference of whenever I said God used me like Paul. Paul was a man in the Bible who his name was Saul before, and he was a man who was persecuting the Christians. He would drag them out of their homes so that they could, with the law at that time that he studied and he was so well known with, he couldn't see Christ. And he went from one man that was basically murdering Christians and had an encounter with the Lord, and the Lord changed his heart. From that encounter, it changed his heart. And that's exactly what happened to me. And when I asked God to use me like that, that's what I meant. Because it was only the Lord that could have changed my life. And so that's my testimony, and just really being marked. Like when I went home, like I was like, God, you can have every single piece of my life. Like, and I meant it, because I should have been dead, and I felt purpose. I felt whole. I felt completely one with the man who made me, with the God who created everything. He created me, and he loves me. And so I trusted that enough to say, yeah, you can have it. And so it's been a journey ever since, but that's the moment that definitely marked my life.
For the person, I'm just curious question, I guess there'd be people going, maybe she's just hallucinating, she's fasting, right. Maybe she's weak, maybe it's just visions in the head. But I think what evidence is was there any difference between your life beforehand and your life after, or was it just the same?
No, it was definitely different. Like, even though I had been pursuing the Lord before, and that's a fair question, like, and I think the thing as being a Christian, it starts all with faith. And faith is believing something that you have hope to see evidence of. And it takes faith, because it doesn't start as a head knowledge. Because I remember the first times I was reading scriptures and I was like, I don't even understand any of this. It goes completely against the human nature to like live like Christ. And it's weird. Like, you're like, what the heck? But I think one of the things that, even though I was pursuing the Lord, I didn't really necessarily have peace or have a purpose. And a purpose necessarily, when I say that, it's not like again, to start out, like, I thought my purpose was like God was going to tell me what to do and I would do it. But it was more of a purpose of having peace and knowing that peace and that love, as I was saying, love is, the world knows it as an emotion, but that peace is the man, and it's Jesus. And that love is Jesus. It's God. God is love. He's true love. He's a sacrificial love. He's a love that never fails. Like, he doesn't go back on his word. He's always there. And so I had that, and I didn't have that before. And so that was something that, like, even in those moments, it's something that I can share with somebody. And I tell people, like, you know what? Like, you don't need, like, if you can take anything away, like, you just ask God. Like, you ask God, like this is real. Like, I can feel this. And my encounter was so real that I was so good at pushing people away. I couldn't deny or push this love away. And everything in me knew that it was true. And I got to walk away with that. And from that moment, my life did change. And that if you're somebody and you've never really believed or want God to make himself real to you, that's all you do. It says, come to him with an open heart, ask, seek, and you'll find. And so I would just encourage, like, ask God. You're like, would you make yourself real to me? But out of a place of really wanting to know. And he will. I'm absolutely certain he will.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing your testimony.